Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host of Circular Firing Squad. We've got 6 members, 6 questions, and 6 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member, and they run from the deep to the dopey. Let's go ahead and do roll call.
Hi, everyone. Eric Perry. I'm Director of Counseling Programs at Southern New Hampshire University.
Hello, my name is Gina Martin, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and co-host of Supervision Time.
Hi, Steph Martyr, doctoral candidate at Kent State University, practicing clinical counselor and co-host of Grad School Deconstructed.
Elliott Ingersoll, professor of counseling at Cleveland State University and host of Apply Topically.
Jenn Cook, associate professor, New England College.
Eric, you're up with our first question tonight.
All right. So my question is, what is your favorite flaw in a favorite person of yours?
So I went back and forth about this question over and over all day. I've been mulling this over, and I think I'm going to say this at the risk of embarrassing someone, and that's okay. It is what it is. So my dad is one of the most intelligent people that I know. Highly intelligent, like went to Chicago Booth. I can't even think of the name, MBA program, whatever, for business school, and has been highly successful business wise his whole life. He's been savvy. He's been just highly intelligent and very with it for all of that kind of stuff. And yet he is the most aloof human being that I know. He is so aloof that whenever we go on family vacations, we refer to him as Mr. Magoo. He will be dictating where we're going and shifting, like, okay, we were in France at one point and we were going through this tour or whatever. And he was like our fearless leader. He was telling us exactly what rooms we had to go to. It was like all up in Normandy, and he knew all the history and everything and whatever. And so he's telling us exactly where we have to go. And then he turns and he falls up the stairs. And my mom, sister, and I all just lost it. We were peeing our pants. We were laughing so hard. And he just has absolutely no idea and no conception that that was funny or why that was funny. And so he just continued on the tour per usual. And we didn't see him for like 3 hours. And that is how traveling with my father is. And so for someone who can be so highly intelligent, he is just so completely oblivious to everything around him. And it's so endearing. So that's my favorite flaw about one of my all-time favorite people.
Well, that's funny. So when I was thinking about this, I couldn't think of a flaw that I really appreciated in anybody, that I was just like, I know that it's probably there. It just has not popped in my head. However, I thought I would provide the favorite feature of a flaw, because I don't like the whole flaw. So, he's in the next room. But my partner can be sometimes challenged on punctuality, just slightly. He has opportunities for growth regarding punctuality. And while it doesn't always work well for me. I like being on time, or at least knowing how much to wait. Like if you're always going to be 15 minutes late, cool, then I can factor that in and I can just like adjust accordingly and it's fine. It's different. But what I really appreciate is that he doesn't expect that out of anybody else. So if I'm running 20 minutes behind, even though I'm always trying to be on time for everything. So like I said, I was going to be there. I need to be there. But if I run behind, or if I take an extra 20 minutes chit-chatting with friends before I leave, it's fine. It's no problem. And I really appreciate that. So my partner is definitely one of my favorite people in the whole entire universe. And I really love that he doesn't expect anybody else to be on time.
Well, I guess my first thought was people who resist the urge to quit hanging out with me. So that's a flaw that I like, But then the other one's related. It was like people I know who They are not able to, I'm putting this in Korzybskian air quotes, they are not able to quit the arts. And they have this kind of possession by a muse, and I get it. And it's just like, yeah, we could have a support group, but we're not going to quit to support. We just want to like stay in. We could have a support group to stay in the arts because they don't give, you give your soul to them. And then, you're just discarded like an old husk. Anyway, I think that's my answer.
I'm like feeling like so slow. I was glad to be further in to hear what other people had to say with this question. Because if I would have been first, I'd have been like, because I was like, well, if it's that big of a flaw, then would I still be friends with that person? Sorry, Eric, I'm like picking on your question, but I'm like, so I think like what I went for was like differences, almost like what Steph was talking about like favorite feature of a flaw. And I'm an Aquarius, so I kind of live in this world of like, that's good and that's good, like it's all good, I'd be glad to have tacos or, hey, burgers sound fine too, like I am that person based on my astrological sign, according to my belief system. But I tend to attract all these Virgos in my life, and Virgos are planners. They want everything planned out, everything, every little last thing. Like if we're going to a conference, they have figured out what restaurants we're going to. And anybody who's been to a conference with me is like, I'm like, let's take a walk. Let's see what's around. Let's see what like draws us into, to them, as we're out walking and whatnot, which, some of you who are here today know that results in us being hungry and going back to the hotel and eating in the hotel bar. So, that I would say that maybe this is my flaw, but I have come to love the planners in my life. Like I love that there are certain people that I go somewhere with them. I don't ever have to worry about making a choice. I'm going to go with whatever it is that they want to do and where we're going to turn up, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm not going to complain because I didn't have to make a decision about it. So I don't know if it's so much of the flaw as it is just the difference in operation in terms of how they live their life and how I apparently live mine.
Jenn, I actually changed Eric's question a little bit so I could get off the hook, because the question originally read something like, what's the fatal flaw in your favorite person? Which would mean that would probably single it down to my spouse, who doesn't listen to this podcast anyways. That's her fatal flaw. And I wanted to kind of not put her on the, in the firing squad like I just did. So there is a favorite person of mine who was very influential early on in my career. He saw something in me that I didn't see. He saw a lot of creativity. He knew I had some skills, and I didn't know where to place them. And he was real helpful in giving me a place to place them. At the same time, he was in a different income level as me, a little bit posh and a bit arrogant, particularly kind of intellectually arrogant with people. And I thought it was a great quality. I kind of still admire this person's ability to take on these kinds of arguments with folks to sustain a point. Other people see that as a bit arrogant. And so he's become a barometer in my life when I make comment to other people who might know him. It's interesting to see their reaction. So yeah, a favorite person, but I think a little bit flawed in one area, and still great respect for the way in which he mentored me in that process early on in my career.
Yeah, for me, so a couple of stories come to mind, but I'll give you the overview. So my partner has been on the show before. She's scared of literally everything. I mean, in fear for her life at all times, right? My son will turn a corner with a stuffed animal and she screams, right? Just everything she sees that she does not expect that comes into her frame of view is terrifying. So early on in the relationship, we're watching a movie and she lets out this like blood curdling scream. right? And we had paused the movie so that she could go to the restroom, and she's going to walk up the stairs. And I immediately, jump up and run to the stairs, and I'm trying to see, what happened. I thought, was she hurt? Did she see something? We weren't living in the greatest place, so there was some trepidation. We were new to the area. So I asked her what's wrong, and she won't answer me. And this goes on for a good period of time. So my heart's pounding on my chest, and I'm just frantic trying to figure out what happened. And finally, she gets the words out that she had seen her own shadow, forgot that it was hers, and thought someone was following her up the stairs to the restroom, right? And most of the time, this leads to being humorous and funny. And sometimes it makes me, my startle response is completely off at this point. People scream, and I just glance. I'm used to it. It happens in my environment so often that it's completely messed with my natural response to things. So it was something that came to mind for this question, and, got permission prior to putting it on the air.
That is awesome, Eric. I really appreciate that about your wife. So my question, we're switching gears a little bit. How do you engage students in a long night class?
All right. So, I think a lot of it is about changing it up, maybe doing different activities throughout the class time. Starting, if you have to do some boring stuff, start with the boring stuff first, get it out of the way, and then maybe move into an activity, have discussions. Hopefully it's a topic that you can generate that energy going through. But I think definitely staying away from a 3-hour lecture.
Well, I agree with Stephanie. Definitely got to mix it up. A lot of humor. And I use a lot of, coerced sing-alongs. So I got songs for, like psychopharmacology, and we got songs for therapy. We got all kinds of songs. So I like to tell people we're going to, we can have a dialogue, or I'm about to pull out my guitar and we're going to sing some songs. So that'll usually get the dialogue going. But that works.
I pretty much love that you're having a sing-along in your class. And although I reference song lyrics on a regular basis, probably during class, I probably have sang during class accidentally, but I'm a switcher upper. I have always taught at night. Well, there's been an occasional daytime class in my time as an instructor, but not very often. I was educated at night. I teach at night. Like, it just feels normal, and 3-hour minimum courses. So anytime I've taught in a smaller time frame, it feels weird because I feel like I don't get as many chances to mix it up because I feel like I'm always switching things around. I think also, and maybe this is just my performance background of having sang for so many years that it feels almost like being on stage. So I try to make it entertaining. I'm not singing, strangely enough, Elliott, not singing. However, there is there's a quality there of, this is a long period of time and we got to engage people, and, humor is important to me, and being able to have them be themselves and me be myself, that's important to me as well. But I also, now that I've been teaching online, synchronous sessions, we take more breaks. And I when I taught in person 3-hour classes, we had one break at about the 1.5 hour mark, and it was 10 minutes, and then get your butt back in the chair and let's do this. In the online environment, we take at least 2 breaks. It's usually 2. I can't stretch 3 because I can't take a break in an hour. I just typically, sometimes I can, but not usually. But there's always 2 breaks, which is a very different situation. And people are at home. And the way that I found to encourage people to be on camera is that I give them a break that's long enough to fix something to eat or put their kid to bed, or, it's 15 minutes. And I'd never gave 15 minutes when we were physically face to face. So probably some of those kinds of things.
Those are great ideas for online teaching. We're all back at least at Kent State. We're all back face to face at this point, except for the snowstorms, which has thrown us back online again. And but in general, face to face. And I think Steph is the only person that's actually seen. We've taught together. So she's seen what I'm about to talk about. I will forget what I'm supposed to do in an evening if I don't write it on the board. So I'll take a little pen and on the side over in the corner, put together a list of things I want to accomplish that night or activities we're going to do. Students also see that. So they know that we're doing sort of a countdown clock with those activities. So they get a sense of how things are being paced. And along with what Steph said, switching it up, keeping the educational moments in smaller packets. And for me, it's got to be very purposeful. And I might have said this on a previous podcast. I say it when I teach college teaching, but a mentor once talked about teaching in the terms of, why are we meeting like this? And for me, everybody coming to one location on one night for a long period of time, we better do activities in the classroom that requires everybody to be there. Which means probably more demonstrations, more simulations, which I know you can do online, but in a sense, stop and go, kind of three-dimensional therapy, that examples that you can do. So create a structure, keep each section small, so everybody knows where they're on that trip for the evening, and give breaks, lots of breaks, especially for really long classes.
I feel like I want my own show for this part. Like I need my own couple of hours to just give all of this, because it's my favorite thing. I think when I teach, particularly long classes for a long stretch, I like the experiential part. I like to bring things in that I've encountered throughout my experience that, engage, right? And it's action from everyone else, and I'm facilitating. And that's the part that I like. That's why I like the learning to happen. And, I'll credit a lot of this with my time at Presley Ridge. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Presley Ridge, but it's an agency that's here in Pittsburgh. And learned so many different activities and things that I brought in and kind of modified for counselor education. I bring a lot of props. So I have activities that involve hula hoops and mouse traps and, all kinds of different things that just require students to get in and do things. And I think that movement, that getting up out of your seat, that kind of exchange really helps. It really brings something else to that part of the experience. And you can do these things online, in some kind of modified way, through gamification, through, softwares like Captivate and things like that, that you can develop these types of activities and engagements that students can be involved in both live and asynchronously. So I really love that stuff. I get jazzed up about it, but I think that engagement piece is really, really important. I know that my energy has to be high. I have to set that tone. And if I need something to be reflective or we need something to be engaging, I have to set that tone. I'm responsible for that. So I take that part of the experience really seriously. And, it's interesting to watch how the class moves as you start to move through those different activities. And, I think about it as that kind of winding up and, hitting that plateau, that high energy thing, and then moving in and out of those phases and then winding down, like Marty talked about with the list. Sometimes that's really helpful to keep that structure, and other times I want them to be able to engage without looking at the clock, so sometimes I'll run the class like a casino, just keep them away from the times and keep them engaged enough that, they feel like we've just got there. So that's something I get really jazzed about and really like. So I appreciate the question, and I'll cut it off there for time's sake.
I love these responses. And this question was formulated because I went from teaching an hour and a half class periods twice a week in the morning at 9 a.m. to teaching the 3 hours at night in the evening. And my students would come in, and I would come in too. I mean, I would have like a long day, and I'd have meetings upon meetings. And then I would get to class and I'd be like, wow, I've already been here for 10 hours. And I'd sit down and the students would be exhausted, and they'd be like looking at the clock, and they'd be like, falling asleep, and I would be falling asleep. And it was just a really not a great situation. And so this question for me has evolved over the past semester of teaching, in that I realized very quickly early on that students would be falling asleep if we just did lecture and a couple activities here and there. So what I ended up doing is I scrapped all of the, traditional stuff that you would see in like a counseling classroom. I threw out the lectures, I threw out all the PowerPoints, and I decided to make it purely about how you would use this in actual practice. So I would bring in, like Eric, you mentioned, like narratives from your previous experience and stuff like that. I would have students actually walk through case studies with me, and I would give them the case study live time, and they would ask the client questions, and we facilitated these real life role plays and in live time during the classroom. And it was life-changing. Like, students went from being exhausted to being like at the edge of their seats and really engaged. And so that was something that I really, really appreciated. And it was a good pivot to keep everyone from going down at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday or whatever. So I appreciate that. And Elliott, I'm probably going to have to ask you for some songs, because I tried bringing songs. I brought Sound of Silence in, and everyone was like, this is the worst song ever. And I was like, awesome. I don't know what to say to that. I'm just done. So we made it all about clinical case studies, and it changed my evening routine.
That's so great that you were just kind of able to deviate from perhaps how you structured class in the past and just come up with something totally different. And it's so great to hear how it worked for you. It's exciting. All right. So again, switching gears, what makes a movie good?
Since we're in the realm of aesthetics, I assume subjective judgment is expected here. I mean, I would start with Ryan Reynolds. I can pause. You can soak that in. It's a great starting place. But, other than that, transcendent themes, happy endings, and excellent soundtracks. That's what I really like.
I don't really watch movies all that much anymore. I don't know. Like, I like characters to develop over time. And so I think that that's why I get attracted to series, because I like the story to develop over time. It's the same with reading books. I don't like to come in the middle of a series. I don't like to come in on the middle of an author. I like to start with that author from the beginning and see how they develop their style and the way they talk about characters, and change the way, I'm finishing up the Lee Child series, the Reacher series. I've been reading it for about 2 years now. It started in the mid 90s, and I started at the beginning. And most of the books are in third person. Some are in first person. I love seeing that change. I love seeing, the development of how he talks about the characters and quits using as much British English as US English, because he's a Brit talking about US. And so there were just these interesting things. That's what I like if I watch a movie, but I can't usually get that in an hour and a half or whatever a movie is. And I don't really have the patience for, Dr. Zhivago length movies. Like, I like them to be broken up because, into these different episodes. So I guess what makes the movie good is that it's a TV series.
Wow. That's different from me. I'm a cinemaphile. I love movies, and I love that story arc in 2.5 hours or 2 hours or whatever. But what makes a movie good? It's probably not what you think or what you might think I think. It's got to be something that takes me away, bad or good. So I'm in a theater and I forget I'm in a theater. Now, I watched just yesterday a piece of crap film with my son called Moonfall. And it was, one of these big, so Will wanted to go, and he and I have been doing movies together for, since he was a teenager. And I'll tell you, it was so bad it was good, in the sense that you were waiting for the next ridiculous plot twist, and it was just so bad. And the science was bad. The plot was bad. It was the character development. But It was so bad we didn't walk out. It was so bad we wanted to stay. And we were the only two people in the theater, so we could kind of talk out loud and riff the film as it went. For me, that was a good movie, but it was bad.
You had your own Mystery Science Theater, right?
Yeah, I raised my son on Mystery Science Theater, so yeah, we knew what to do.
It was ingrained. You were ready. Yeah, so huge nerd, right? This is not a secret. And, in the nerd community, there's always these arguments between factions, right? Like, is it Marvel or DC? And, what particular types of anime? And, there's all this like back and forth. And I don't care. If I'm entertained, if I enjoy it, if I'm into it, I don't get that invested, right? I like all of it. If you could see behind my monitors right now, I have a mix of like Marvel and DC decorations up, and I'm into all of it. I think if I'm entertained, if like Marty said, if it takes me away, if it keeps me engaged, it's good for me. And I enjoy sometimes watching people critically kind of pick apart movies. And, if I'm in it for a thriller or I'm in it for a scare or something like that. So those are the reactions that I look for. But by and large, I'm really just looking for those things to entertain me. And if they do, they're good. If they don't, I'm out. Not academic, but it's kind of the way I roll with them.
For me, I'm like you, Jen, where I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't watch a lot of TV in general. And I love the really lengthy books, like the 1,000-page, the 1,200-page historical fiction that most people would, quit after the first chapter when they realized how verbose and wordy it was. But that's something that I really enjoy because of the character development and because of, Marty, what you talked about, that ability to like be transported to somewhere else and to feel like I'm really there, even if I'm just sitting in my living room or whatever. So I don't watch a lot of movies, and I love a few movies so much because they make me think of them years later, and I find images from the movie popping into my mind, or I think of the setting in a movie that I love, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I could be in that place right now, or whatever the context would be. So I think for me, what makes a movie good and a book is any ability to transport me to whatever situation the people are going through, and that ability to think of it days, weeks, years later, whatever it might be.
So everybody, seemed to touch on things. And it's funny because, Elliott, as you mentioned in the beginning, this is a very subjective question. This is not, well, I mean, there are correct answers, but, no, just kidding. It's subjective. But I had on here did I forget I was watching a movie? So that goes to what people were saying, as far as being enveloped into the story. Gina, what you just said was, did I think about it afterwards? And that was another point that I had on there. And was it something new to me? Was it something, but I think that kind of makes you think, right? So that kind of goes into the thinking part of it. And it's funny because I think a movie can also change. I was thinking about this as everyone was talking, that there are movies where I watch it the first time and I am not transported. I am looking at my watch. I'm wondering when the movie will be over. And oh my gosh, I hope it's only 90 minutes and not like 120 minutes. But then I don't know, something changes and maybe I'll watch it again and it hits me in a different way. An example of this is Tropic Thunder. I thought Tropic Thunder was like the dumbest movie I ever saw. I saw it in the theater. I couldn't wait. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just so self-indulgent. And, it's silly. Okay. But then I watched it later. I don't know. And I just think it's hilarious. It's genius. It strikes me differently. It's not the most, intellectual example I can give, but that was just another way where perhaps a movie is good, but it just took a little time to get there.
Okay, I think the next question's mine. If you had the resources to switch fields and pursue a different career, what would it be?
I'm legitimately laughing because I have switched careers. Harken back to the earlier question, Aquarius here. So like I'm always thinking about that I'm going to be doing another job. And I love this job. Like I think that this is my niche, right? But let me tell you what I would love to do. And I think y'all are going to laugh at me on this, but I would love to be an engineer, and specifically of the aeronautical type, because I would love to work for the NTSB and investigate aircraft that have gone faulty or crashed or, all of those kinds of things. I love those shows that piece together and find like the pieces out in the ocean and bring them back and listen to the black box and do all of that kind of stuff. Like I would love to be able to do that. And every time I watch another program that has the NTSB coming together to try to solve what happened to this aircraft, I think, boy, is there a chance I'd be able to get the training to work for them before I'm 60? Like, would I be able to get the degrees to be able to do this? And then the experience, and I was like, no, I'd probably be 110 before I would qualify, because I'd have to start from scratch. I got a liberal arts degree, for goodness sake. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm not just going to a master's program, So at any rate, there are these like fantasies out there of things that strike my interest, and I have many. Because, Aquarius, I have many interests that I enjoy, and being an armchair, lawyer, for example, I would love to be a lawyer, and I'm not, but my brain works that way, or own a restaurant, or, all those things. But I think I'll stick with counselor educator and the ways in which counselor educator gets repurposed, because there's lots of ways that we can make an impact, not just in a university setting, but in other places too.
And technically, they do call lawyers counselors in the UK. So there's you're okay.
And in Spanish, consejera, which is as close as you're going to get, is basically a lawyer, but it's counselor.
Okay, I'm going to turn this around. What do you think I would do if I could switch fields?
Riverboat captain.
Interesting. I don't think you think what you might think it is, but I never contemplated riverboat captain. I listened to an interview with Paul Sand, who is an actor, comedian, improvisational person from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and got a real appreciation and thought, yeah, this would be something I would like to do. Improvisational troupe, something, if I could do it and had the funds and the training and get to it, something like Second City. I wouldn't want to go any bigger than that. I don't want to be on Saturday Night Live, but just sort of in the moment, creative fun. I think if I could switch fields and do something and had the resources to do it. So, be part of an improvisational troupe and make a little money to survive off that.
Right. Well, mine is pretty straightforward. I think those who know me know that coffee is a big part of my life, right? It's something I hold dear. I don't speak to my children before I have coffee in the morning, right? I'll glance at them lovingly, but I won't speak until coffee's done brewing. I would own a coffee shop. And, it's always, for me, see them all the time opening up and shutting down, opening up. People try it a lot. But, I would love to have the coffee shop where there's like games and tournaments and, different things to do. We had a place like that. One of the places my father was stationed and went there all the time, and I loved it. It was great. It was board games, it was video games, it was coffee. And I just remember it being a particularly settled time for me. And just the aroma, the smell, the environment, right? I love a good like home local coffee shop. So I think for me, if I was to relax and do anything that I felt was going to just bring me peace and joy, the number 2 would be coffee shop owner.
Mine would not necessarily bring me peace and joy. like Jenn, I have a lot of ideas and I've thought about a lot of different things. One thing that I think I would have loved to pursue if I had the resources and the time and the years and the energy would be to be a medical doctor, like emergency room, high crisis type situation. I have had some experiences in the past when I've been traveling that I've gone to several different countries and I always end up in an ER wherever I go. It's just like a fact of how I travel. And I thrive in those scenarios. I'm not always the one who's being treated in the ER. Sometimes I am. And other times I'm helping someone respond to an emergency or whatever. And I find that like the sight of blood doesn't really bother me too much. And I stay calm in some of those high stakes scenarios. So I think being an ER doctor would be one possible avenue. Another would be like, FBI or something like that. Another high stakes, like stay pretty calm in those scenarios. Though I don't know, I would have like the patience for all the training. So that's where I'm at today. And it definitely wouldn't be peaceful and comforting. It would definitely be a different pace. And I think I'd be up for that for a while. But truly, I love what I do. And I wouldn't trade it for pretty much anything else. So that's where I'm at.
I want to be a professional roller derby person. I want to be in the roller derbies. And I want to be able to roll around and push people over and get tough, but in a slightly controlled fashion, perhaps. But it's something I always wanted to do. Obviously, I'm never going to do it. I don't think, maybe, probably not. Not at this point, but if I could, and I assume also in this wish, going back in time, perhaps, and getting younger also, just so my body could take more punishment in that way, because it's not fun if you have to be gentle.
Good answers. Yeah, I think maybe similar to Marty, I would probably be in the arts or music. Stand-up comedy has always been something that has fascinated me. I've always thought that was the bravest art form. So I think that, I always thought I would love to run a bookstore, but that's very 20th century. I don't really see that. I think I'd make more in art these days. That's just my thought.
All right. So how many hours a week do you typically work? Is it too much, too little, or just right?
It's just right. I work every moment that I can that I'm not working. So, when I am going to the store for groceries, that takes me away from work. And not to say that I don't enjoy that. If I'm spending time with Aileen, I'm not working. But every moment that I am not working, the next thing I'm doing is working. And I love it. I wind up taking a day off every once in a while, like I did to see that movie yesterday. But I really don't think things have slowed down in terms of my process. I'm not as anxious about work. I'm not as overwhelmed by work. I'm much more calmer about it. So I'm enjoying it more in that sense. And so I have this different rhythm. It's not so intense and not so rushed. And if it happens to get done today, I'm happy. And the rest will wait for tomorrow. No kids to raise, no social life to have to keep up with. I'm happy in my work.
I have a vastly different response. It's interesting because I think there's kind of an ebb and flow. But even in the ebb periods, there's I'm always on to something. And those are actually the times where I find myself digging into things that are more me, right? That I'm more into. My own interests in writing and doing those types of things. When it starts to pick up and things get heavier, I find myself getting a little bit frustrated because I don't have those times. And when it's predictable, it's easy enough. That's the ebb and flow that I can manage. I think for me, having transitioned from a faculty role into a more administrative role, I'm still learning that. I'm still kind of seeing what that is. And it's different. It has a different kind of ebb and flow and timing to it. So it's something I'm still working on and getting used to.
I have a problem where I can't say no. And I think that dictates a lot of my work schedule, not necessarily with my academic job, but also with clients. I still see clients on the side. And whenever someone pitches me with I have a child who's had trauma, I'm like, yes, I'll do it. Of course I'll do it. And then that ends up adding another hour plus the caseload or plus the case notes, plus all of the administrative stuff that goes alongside of that. So I find that oftentimes at the start of a week, I'm overly optimistic with how much I can get done and all of the clients I can see and all the notes I can do and all of the course prep I can do and all of the things. And then I get to Friday and I'm exhausted and I'm like, great, I've got a full day of seeing clients all day on Saturday. So I would say I work 6 full days and that's a lot. It's a little too much at this point, but I really struggle with saying no. And that is my burden to carry.
That's your albatross. So, I'm thinking about this and I'm like, define work, because it's like, if it's just as far as seeing clients, I'm seeing clients about 9 hours a week right now. Is it about working on dissertation? Working on dissertation, hopefully at least an hour a day. But then the rest of the time, I am following around a nearly 10-month-old who can have pretty, on the early side of normal development of motor skills. So they're able to do everything, but at the same time, they know nothing and understand nothing about danger and gravity. So while it's not the work that might be alluded to here in this question, I can't not do it. It has to get done. So it's not enough academic or professional work for me, I think. And at the same time, I wouldn't not do the other work too. But it's still a good 14-hour day anyway you cut it. So
yeah, I kind of assumed that this was more about academic work. So that's what I kind of thought of. But I've been through some weird transitions, because as a department chair, that was 60 plus easy every week. It just never stopped. I think I might have gotten some wisdom with age, because I'm like, why the hell did I do that? I'll never do that again. You heard it here first, folks. Send your cards and letters to Circular Firing Squad. Anyway, so that was the first thing I thought of. But then when I went back to faculty, there was still all kinds of stuff to do. And that was, I'd say 40 to 50 hours a week. And then since I've had long COVID, I'm lucky to get 40 hours in. It's just so weird, because I'm like, sleeping 12 hours totally cuts into your day. And I'm like, so I've gone through these 2 huge shifts and I'm like, all right, what's next? Retirement would sound kind of like the logical thing, but I don't think that's quite the next thing. Anyway.
Yeah, it's really fascinating in academia, because there's this concept out there that I feel like gets played with us a lot, which is passion. That if you're passionate about the job, which many of us are, we're passionate about the work, then you will put in the 60 plus hours and you will like it because you're passionate. So, if you're paid for 40, but 60 because you're passionate, we get 20 a week for free. So this whole, Bob Newhart, stop it, became my motto over time, because they're not going to keep me warm with that 60 or that 20 hours a week of passion. That doesn't pay my heating bill. That doesn't pay my rent. It doesn't, give me the time back to spend with my family and friends. And so, I've been in that 60 plus, and I'm not in that 60 plus anymore. And it was interesting to sit and be like, I am not sure how I spend my time if I'm not working that 20 hours. What am I going to do with that extra 20 hours that I just got back? And where is that passion going to be filtered, right? So it's fascinating to kind of like think through that, because I, like Marty, when I wasn't working, I was thinking about working, and I like to work, and I am passionate for the work. And I'm also passionate about justice and economic justice, especially for people who work in the types of jobs in which we work. And that seems to be lacking. So I'm a solid 40er now. And I've had some interesting work around boundaries, because I teach in a 6 to 9 time frame now. I taught 4 to 6:40 for the longest time. And now I'm in 6 to 9, which means, and I'm an early morning person. So what do you do with that when you teach until 9 o'clock at night? Well, that means you have to take a break in the middle of the day. So like I've started having this midday thing where, it's time for a walk and to eat lunch, not at my computer. It's time for a rest or read a book or play a game or call a friend, So it's interesting to kind of work the schedule to where it's like, I could get more done in that 4 hours, or I could get more done, and it will be for my own benefit, right? And sometimes it's just, I'm going to sit and look out the door. I have this beautiful tree in the apartment I live in now that attracts birds. And even in the middle of winter, I get to see cardinals. They come to my tree, Sometimes I sit in a recliner chair and look at the cardinals during my break in the afternoon. And that's cool. I think that's cool, because that means that's my time rather than my passion time that somebody gets for free.
Yeah, I really like the midday breaks. And frankly, COVID, working from home, has made those midday breaks, because like you, Jen, I'm early in the morning, and then I have this job that happens in the evening that I've got to respond to. So I've had to give myself permission to take a nap, read something, watch a little television, something in the middle of the day to kind of free it up. Otherwise, by the time 4 o'clock rolls around and I've got to teach, I get resentful and I don't want to be there. My question, and we have quite a few, it seems like quite a few academic and teaching related questions, but it's been a while since we've done a show. So I thought I'd put in some hooks to get people back in. How do you select books for courses? What's the process that you use, if there is a process?
So it used to be what book fits the course best, right? I used to critically evaluate these books against each other. Like, here are the 3 theories books I'm familiar with, and which one is best and has the best resources. That's the one I'm going to go with. And sometimes they're shiny because you recognize the names or you use them in grad school yourself. And you're like, this is easier because I'm familiar with it, right? I've studied this before. I got away from that quite a bit. Primarily started to look at and focus more on what is it that I want them to learn, right? What is it that I want them to get from the material? There are several courses that I've worked on over the past year or two that I don't use a singular textbook or resource. I'm really intentful about, maybe there's a primary text that has, 3 or 4 things that I really want them to get to. But, there are other things out there. There are research articles, there are videos, there's media, there's content, and that I can develop or find myself and provide to them that's going to give them a better handle on this concept or this construct that we're working on. That needs to be the focus, right? I don't care for us to get through all 15 chapters of a particular book because somebody wrote it in the field. You know what I mean? It needs to really fit that. The other thing I've been really on, and I realize that some of this just comes from my own angst and my own background, is it needs to be a reasonable cost for the student. It needs to be accessible to the student, right? And both financially and just from an accessibility standpoint, right? It needs to be appropriate for their level, for their ability, for, to be able to make accommodations for that particular text. I can't stand these textbooks that are out there and just like, here's 800 pages of whatever, use it because my name is nice and it, you've seen me at conferences. Well, what about everything else, right? What about all the additional resources that students may need to be able to access it, who struggle with disabilities, who struggle with financial ability? These are all things that I think you have to consider. It's not a small task, right, by any means. So for me, a lot goes into that particular decision. And again, oftentimes it's not buying into 15 or 16 chapters of whatever textbook. It's, what's going to provide me the most bang for my student's buck and their ability to learn a particular concept that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I really don't place a lot of stock in textbooks. I just said not too long ago that I love those like 1,000-page, really long, lengthy books when they're novels, not when they're textbooks. I think that a lot of translation gets lost in textbooks because students find them to be pretty inaccessible. The language can be dense and stuff like that. So I find a lot of value in finding books that are accessible in terms of the content. So developmentally, where's the class located in their curriculum? Is it beginning? Do they want to learn about the field? Then I'm going to be giving them more resources on what it's like to actually be a therapist. Later on, it's going to be more about like conceptualizing clients and figuring out the nitty gritty and diagnosing and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to find things that are going to be more pertinent to that stage of development of the counselor. And all that being said, I mentioned, I talk a lot about this on here, that I love to read. And so I find textbooks through reading a lot of books. And Eric, like you mentioned, right, parsing out like those chapters here and there that really capture what you're trying to get across in the class can be so beneficial. So finding those like supplemental resources for students, or just creating your own resource based on the amalgamation of these different resources that you find within the field can be so beneficial. All that being said, this past year, because I've been pressed for time and I haven't had the time to research, and I didn't know what I was teaching until I accepted the job and all that, I've just used what's been done in the past. And I can say that that has been a big challenge for me because I like to go through this whole process and because I like to pull things out from different areas. And due to time, it's been a challenge. So that's where I'm at. And I'm really looking forward to that next stage of using the summer to read and to find those meaty resources that are going to be helpful for practicality's sake.
I'm going to echo what both Eric and Gina were saying regarding, finding things maybe for more specific topics. That's what I was also considering, not necessarily needing one huge textbook for a course, finding, things that might discuss the topic from a different angle, or for something that's maybe creates more discussion in the class rather than just like, here is it, and, know this, but as far as actually like finding those resources, going through either Journal Finder, through whatever university tool you're using, Googling, just to start. And then maybe also once you have an idea of what you're looking for, or what you're finding and what you'd like to use, maybe you can, ask people that that you would trust, to say, hey, have you heard of this? Or, just to hear what else other people have to say about it. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I wouldn't go on to like huge sites necessarily and just say, hey, tell me what resources to use. I see that done sometimes. And, it can be a good source for maybe getting ideas, but I don't want someone just to say, use this and be done with it.
Yeah, for me, it depends on the course. So like personality theory has just exploded in the last 15 years. So I just give them papers. And again, cost is a huge thing for students. We try to keep the cost down any way we can. But then there's some classics like Gordon Allport's very small book, Becoming, is a great personality theory book. Sometimes I'll have them read that. Other classes, I'm writing in the areas that I'm teaching. So I'm usually reading a lot of other people's books. And so that helps me make choices. When you have your own texts, it's kind of weird because, of course, I think totally biased. I believe, we have this integrative approach. It's the best way to teach it. So I use my own book. But, oh, man, is that really proper? I don't know. If it's any consolation, we never made any money on the psychopathology books. So no one got ripped off there, at least as far as I know. we went with a publisher that would keep the cost down, but then the students complained the binding was cheap. So I'm like, I don't know what I've learned. But I think, keep the cost down. And I have favorites. I do have favorites where if Somers Flanagan do another edition, I'm going to be like, I'm going to check that out. I love that book, So there's that too.
Well, nobody's mentioned this. I mean, I just use whatever's advertised on SESNet. I mean, I see something advertised there and that's what I pick. I'm totally kidding. I've actually found a really great resource. People have mentioned stuff I would do too, and I do, but I've actually found that the reps at the major publishing companies are pretty knowledgeable about their books. And there have been some pretty amazing reps that I've worked with that I've called them up and I've described the type of book I'm looking for. So for example, when I taught the family systems class back at my previous university, the students that I was teaching were straight up clinical mental health. They were not training to be marriage and family, couple and family therapists. Like there was no reason to use the theories textbook that teaches every single damn theory and technique for couple and family therapy. And I think because I was trained in a couple and family track, I feel very protective over that course. And I don't want students walking away from it who are going to be eligible to work towards a licensed professional counselor, that they have the capacity now to do couple and family work after one course. They absolutely do not. So anyway, this is a long story. I call up a couple book reps and I'm like, hey, this is the type of book I'm looking for, which is how to better conceptualize systems that includes family theories, but is more than just the techniques. Like I wanted them to get broader and more granular within sort of the Bronfenbrenner systems type approach, while also getting the family theories in there as part of it. And one of them was like, I don't know what you mean. And then another one of them was like, oh, I know someone within our company who's editing a book that sounds exactly what you're talking about. And it's supposed to come out in December. I was going to be teaching the class in January. And she actually showed up. She was a local rep, like kind of in the region. She showed up with sample chapters that were hard copy that had, do not duplicate all over them, and was like, are you interested in this? And I read through them and I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, and got this great book. So like when you get a knowledgeable representative, they'll hook you up and they'll let you know, like, we don't have something like this and you should try over at X or B or whomever that they have some familiarity with. And I've had really great success of finding books. The same with the research class. Like I hated, like, we teach quant, then we teach qual, then we teach mixed methods. I wanted like a method that brought them all together. Well, happens to be a textbook over in anthropology that's perfect for that, And again, talk to a book rep who knew the collection super well of what they represented and was able to point me in that direction. So anyway, sometimes the resources like out of the immediate and into like the specific of like, this is their job and this is what they do. And we all get those emails and we're like, I can pick my own damn textbook, and we delete them. But some of these folks are really good.
These are all good answers, much better than what I had. And this is my own damn question. So I got to tell you, I do believe that textbooks have something to contribute in and of themselves. And there's a wide variety of textbooks out there on topics, but the courses I'm teaching in general require us to do a survey of a particular area and topic. So I don't feel like I can pick low-hanging fruit and feel like I've done the job of teaching students about this broad area without going into some things that probably not my cup of tea, but things that they should be aware of in that process. So I try to find textbooks and try to find ones that are readable. I hate to say it this way, but if they have pictures, diagrams, and bullet lists, that makes it easier for students to consume the information than just text. And I'm seeing this more as a trend with textbooks intended in our field, where they are kind of making it much more compartmentalized, engaged learning, instead of some of the things that I had to read going through my graduate program. I'm concerned about pricing. I really am concerned about prices. I don't assign a textbook that I don't expect students to be responsible for and being evaluated on reading at least 3/4 of the book. I mean, there are chapters that are kind of a waste of time, but generally I try to pick a book that has that resource and look at ways to keep the cost of textbooks down. Now, dare I say this on a podcast, not that I give students this information, but I try to find books that are, of course, available in the library. So the 4 or 5 copies students can fight over. And also maybe ones that people can find bootlegged in digital versions on the internet for free. And students, once one student knows how to do that, all students know how to do that. So, I will go and do my own search to find out if this book is available in other places and other sites. And that, to a degree, influences my choice of the book. I get emails from students saying, what if I did an earlier edition of that? Is this okay? I'm like, yeah, generally it is, because they haven't changed a lot. And for that purpose, try to find something that makes it more accessible to them. So all good ideas on textbooks. I didn't expect the wealth of responses on this and sort of differences of opinion, which is pretty cool. So final shot question. That we've been through all of our questions tonight. And the final shot question is bagels or donuts?
Nothing like a glazed donut with a cup of coffee, right? Donut's easy.
I have eaten a blueberry bagel with cream cheese for majority of my life every single day for breakfast. So I'm going to go bagel.
I have to go bagel because what the heck are you going to put your locks on?
I have been touched in my life by donuts emotionally. I have never shed a tear for a bagel. So I gotta go for donuts.
I'm so
Jenn, are you losing it? She's a little verklempt.
I started to drop a tear for the donut that I can't eat because I don't eat sugar. So for once, I'm going to answer singular answer, bagel.
All right. So this question, today is the day we record. It's a Sunday. And today I held what I refer to my family as bagel church. Since I've stopped attending normal services or as a fallen Catholic, and my kids have too, pre-COVID, we started meeting at the bagel shop on Sunday mornings, and we referred to it as bagel church. Now, it's too cold to sit outside the bagel church or the bagel shop. And so kids come over occasionally, maybe every other Sunday or 2 Sundays out of a month or whatever. And we have bagel church at my house. So I got to go with bagels. That's it for the squad. And thanks to them, Eric, Gina, Stephanie, Elliott, and Jenn. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.